After years of working late shifts, freelancing just to make rent, and dealing with supervisors who barely remembered my name, landing a full-time analyst position at a respected financial firm felt like the reward I'd been waiting for. The pay wasn't huge, but the opportunity was. The office sat on the 23rd floor of a sleek glass building downtown. Every morning, I'd step off the elevator, coffee in hand, nodding to the security guard, and walk past those glass-walled conference rooms filled with people in crisp suits. It made me feel, for the first time, like I belonged somewhere that mattered. And at the center of it all was Robert H. Collins, the regional director, my boss. He was charming, confident, and smart, the kind of man who could walk into any room and make everyone pay attention. People respected him, even feared him a little. When he shook my hand on my first day, he said, "Welcome to the team, Ethan. I expect excellence, but I reward loyalty." I believed him. God, I actually believed him. At first, everything went well. I worked hard, stayed late, double-checked reports, and handled the numbers no one else wanted to touch. My teammates liked me. Even Robert seemed pleased. He'd drop by my cubicle sometimes, pat me on the shoulder, and say, "Good work, Ethan. You've got an eye for detail. Keep it up." Then came the Wexler project. It was supposed to be a big deal, a high-profile financial analysis for one of our company's top clients, Wexler Manufacturing. They were considering a merger, and our job was to analyze the numbers, highlight risks, and make sure everything lined up before millions changed hands. Robert personally assigned me to the project. "You'll be my right hand on this one," he said. "If we pull this off, it's going to make both of us look very good." I took that as a promise. For 3 weeks, I lived and breathed those spreadsheets. Late nights, early mornings, weekend calls, all of it. I was proud of the work I did. The numbers were solid, the projections clear, but then something strange happened. 2 days before the client presentation, Robert sent me a revised dataset, one I'd never seen before. "Update the report with these figures," he said briskly during a late-night call. "These are the final numbers from corporate. Don't question it, just use them." I frowned. "But sir, these projections don't match the raw data from Wexler's audits. There's a $12 million discrepancy." He paused for a beat. Then his tone hardened. "I said update the report. That's an order, Ethan." That night, I stared at the new data for hours. The numbers were off, not just slightly, but significantly. They painted a false picture of Wexler's profitability. If the client acted on this, they'd be walking into a financial disaster. Something inside me twisted. Every instinct screamed that it was wrong. The next morning, I went to Robert's office. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city like a king surveying his kingdom. "Sir," I said carefully, closing the door behind me, "I went through the new numbers. They're not accurate." He turned slowly, one eyebrow raised. "Not accurate?" "They don't match the verified audit data. If we present this, it could mislead the client or worse." He sighed and leaned against his desk. "Ethan, let me explain how this works. Sometimes corporate sends projections that are adjusted. It's not your concern. You just make the numbers look clean." I shook my head. "But if this merger goes through based on false data..." He cut me off, his voice suddenly sharp. "You don't understand the politics here. The Wexler deal needs to go through. There are people counting on it, people above my pay grade. Don't make this harder than it has to be." My heart sank. "So you want me to falsify the report?" He gave me a cold smile. "I want you to be a team player." I left his office with my stomach in knots. That night, I made my decision. I finalized 2 versions of the report, the real one with the true data, and the doctored one Robert demanded. And I sent both to my personal email, just in case. When I came in the next morning, Robert looked unusually tense. He called an early meeting, gave a smooth presentation to the board using the falsified report, and everyone clapped. He shook hands, smiled, and acted like a hero. But I could tell something was off. That afternoon, HR called me into their office.
Sitting there were the HR director and Robert, his expression perfectly neutral. "Ethan," the director said, "we've been informed of some inconsistencies in your data work on the Wexler account." My stomach dropped. "What?" I asked. "No, that's—" Robert cut me off. "We found unauthorized changes in the spreadsheets. It looks like you mishandled client data. I'm afraid this is a serious breach." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was framing me. "I didn't alter anything," I said firmly. "Those changes came from you, Robert. You told me—" "Careful," he interrupted smoothly. "Are you accusing your superior of misconduct?" The HR director frowned at me. "Ethan, this is a serious allegation." I realized then what was happening. He was using me as a scapegoat to cover his own falsification. When I tried to protest further, HR shut me down. They said the company had lost confidence in my integrity. By the end of the day, I was escorted out, my ID badge deactivated, my system access revoked, my reputation in ruins. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes in the silence of betrayal. Everything I'd worked for, my credibility, my income, my professional name, gone in a single day because a man with power decided to protect himself. I felt humiliated, angry. But under that anger, something else began to grow, something colder, sharper. Resolve. Because Robert H. Collins made one fatal mistake. He forgot that I had proof. 2 reports, 2 sets of numbers. One showing the truth, and the other showing his lies. And I was going to make sure the world saw both.
That night, after they kicked me out of the building, I sat in my car for nearly an hour, just staring at the city skyline. It was strange. The same lights that used to inspire me now looked distant, cold, fake. I replayed every conversation, every compliment, every "good job, Ethan" Robert had ever thrown my way. It had all been manipulation. He'd seen me as a disposable pawn, the quiet, hard-working guy who wouldn't question him until it was too late. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. When I finally got home, I opened my laptop and began combing through everything. Every email, every message, every spreadsheet I'd ever saved. Thankfully, I'd kept local backups of most of my work. I'd been burned once before by a corrupted server and made it a habit to save critical files offline. That habit had just become my lifeline. I found the original dataset, the one verified by Wexler's own auditors, and the doctored version Robert sent later. Comparing them side by side, the fraud was obvious. He hadn't just adjusted projections. He'd completely inflated Wexler's quarterly earnings by millions. Then something clicked. The metadata on the doctored file. It wasn't created by me. It was created on Robert's work terminal and last modified under his username. I sat back, heart pounding. He had set me up, but in his arrogance, he'd left fingerprints all over the crime. The next day, I drove downtown to meet my friend Lena, an IT specialist who'd worked at Ridgewell before moving to another company. We met at a quiet cafe near the office district. "You look like hell," she said softly as she slid into the booth. "Yeah, well, getting fired for something you didn't do has that effect." She frowned. "What happened?" I explained everything, from the doctored numbers to the HR meeting. I showed her the 2 reports on my laptop. Her eyes widened. "Jesus, Ethan, this is serious fraud. If those fake numbers went to Wexler, your company could be liable for millions." I nodded. "And he's trying to pin it on me." Lena leaned in. "Do you have the emails?" "I have everything. The attachments, the timestamps, even the metadata." She thought for a moment. "You could go to HR again, but they won't listen. He's too powerful inside the company. You need to go higher. Corporate compliance, maybe even Wexler themselves." That last part made my stomach turn. "You're saying I should blow the whistle?" She nodded slowly. "If you want your name cleared, yeah.
But you better be smart about it. Make sure they can't bury it. I sat there quietly, sipping cold coffee, while the weight of her words sank in. I hadn't planned on becoming a whistleblower. I just wanted my job back, my dignity restored. But now I realized it wasn't just about me anymore. If Ridgewell pushed those fake numbers to Wexler, they were committing corporate fraud. Robert wasn't just protecting himself, he was risking an entire company's reputation. I couldn't let that happen. For the next few days, I went underground. I worked from home, compiling every shred of evidence I had into a secure, encrypted drive. I cataloged emails, compared timestamps, built a timeline. And then I noticed something that made my heart race. The doctored file hadn't just been sent to me. It had been forwarded to 2 other executives in upper management, which meant they knew. Robert wasn't acting alone. The fraud went higher than I thought. I decided to reach out to someone inside, someone I could trust. Rachel Torres, one of the senior auditors, had always been kind to me. She'd once told me, "Numbers don't lie, Ethan. People do." I emailed her from a private account, using a personal alias. I didn't include my name, just a message. There's a major discrepancy in the Wexler data. Check the audit trail between January 3rd and February 10th. Look at the metadata. Someone in upper management changed the numbers. I attached both files, original and altered, and hit send. Then I waited. For 2 days, nothing happened. On the 3rd morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Ethan?" The voice was low, cautious. Rachel's. "How did you—" "Don't worry," she said quickly. "I traced the files. I know it's you. And you were right. Someone tampered with the data. But you need to be careful. Robert's already in panic mode. He's been calling emergency meetings. I think he suspects someone's digging." My pulse quickened. "Does corporate know?" She whispered. "Not yet, but they will. I've submitted the report to the compliance board. It's now in their hands." I felt a rush of relief and fear. "Rachel, if he finds out I'm behind this—" She cut me off. "He already suspects you. But if you keep your head down, this could turn in your favor. You just need to let it play out." Before I could respond, she hung up. That night, as I sat in my apartment, there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I froze. Robert was standing there. He looked calm, too calm, his usual smile back in place. "Evening, Ethan. Can we talk?" Every instinct screamed no, but I stepped aside anyway. He walked in, hands in his pockets, surveying my small apartment like he was slumming it. "I hear you've been busy, sending files, asking questions, stirring things up." My throat got dry. "What do you want?" He smirked. "To give you one last chance. Walk away. Delete everything. Forget this ever happened. And I'll make sure your name isn't blacklisted." I stared at him. "You mean if I keep quiet about your fraud?" He gave a little shrug. "Call it damage control. You don't want to go to war with me, Ethan. I built this company's reputation. You're just a name on a file." For a second, I almost laughed. The arrogance was astonishing. "I write you are just a name. But names can tell stories, and yours is about to make headlines." His eyes narrowed. The mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw it, the flash of panic. He leaned closer, voice low. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline.
The first real sign that things were unraveling came 3 days after the investigation was announced. Robert's calendar, usually booked solid for weeks, was suddenly empty. His assistant, who used to greet everyone with forced smiles, had vanished from the front desk. Then came the internal memo. Effective immediately, all financial communications regarding the Wexler account are to be routed through the corporate compliance office. No data alterations or external contact until further notice. That single message sent shockwaves through the company. People whispered in hallways, executives canceled lunches, and for the first time, Robert's name wasn't being said with reverence. It was being said in hushed tones, followed by words like audit, suspension, and liability. I watched from a distance, staying quiet. I knew better than to gloat. But I won't lie, seeing him squirm felt good. Still, I wasn't naive enough to think I was safe. I was technically still terminated, my security badge revoked. My lawyer had already advised me not to contact anyone directly inside the company. But I had one advantage Robert didn't: the truth, and I planned to use it. On the fourth day, I got an email from Rachel Torres, the auditor who had confirmed the metadata. It was short and to the point. Ethan, they've suspended Robert pending review. The compliance board found discrepancies that match your files. But listen carefully, this goes beyond him. They're uncovering other names, and it's getting messy. I'd keep your head down, but prepare for a statement request. My pulse quickened. Other names? Who else was involved? Later that night, I got another message, this time from an anonymous address. It simply read, "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." No signature. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, the glow of my laptop screen reflecting off my glass of whiskey. Was it Robert? Or one of the executives he'd dragged into the fraud? Either way, it told me one thing. I'd hit a nerve. 2 days later, I got a call from Ridgewell's corporate compliance office. The woman on the other end, Miss Harlow, sounded professional, cold, and precise. "Mr. Drake, thank you for your cooperation," she said. "We've reviewed the material you submitted. It has been invaluable in our internal inquiry." I swallowed. "Does that mean my name is cleared?" She hesitated. "Officially, yes. The company acknowledges that you were not responsible for the data manipulation. However," here it came. "However," she continued, "the matter is now under legal review, and we're preparing a full report for Wexler Financial. You may be asked to testify as a witness should the issue escalate." I exhaled slowly. "Testify?" "Yes, and I would advise you to not discuss this investigation with anyone, including Mr. Collins." There was a pause. Then she added, quietly, "Off the record, you did the right thing, Mr. Drake. But be careful. Not everyone here is happy you spoke up." Then she hung up. For a moment, I just sat there in silence. Relief, fear, anger. It all mixed together. I'd been cleared, but something told me this wasn't over. The next morning, it wasn't. A headline popped up on a local business news site. "Ridgewell Analytics under internal audit after data manipulation allegations. Senior executive suspended." The article didn't name names, but the comments section did. Everyone knew who the senior executive was: Robert Collins. Within hours, LinkedIn posts started circulating, employees connecting dots, rumors flying. And then, late that afternoon, I got a call I didn't expect. "Ethan, it's Robert." His voice was hoarse, strained. I didn't say anything at first. "Please," he said, "hear me out." "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I replied coldly. "I know how this looks," he said quickly, "but it's not what you think. They're trying to make me the fall guy. It goes higher than me." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, that's rich coming from you. You framed me to save your career, remember?" There was a pause on the other end. Then, quietly, "You think I wanted to do that? You think I had a choice?" I stayed silent. "He told me to," he continued. "The board knew about the numbers. I was told to clean it up before the audit hit. You were just collateral." His words hit me like ice water. "You're saying the board told you to fake the data?" He hesitated. "Not directly, but they knew. Everyone knew. It was about keeping Wexler happy before the merger announcement." I clenched my jaw. "You're lying." He said, "I wish I was. But you're in danger, Ethan.
You poked the bear, and they're not going to stop with me." He hung up before I could ask anything else. I sat there, phone in hand, stunned. Was he trying to manipulate me again, or was he actually warning me? Because if what he said was true, that the board knew, then I was tangled in something much bigger than one corrupt boss. That night I checked my email again. Another message from Rachel. "Be careful. Someone accessed the compliance report after hours. We're tracing the login. It wasn't Robert. I think someone's trying to erase evidence." I stared at the message, pulse racing. Then my doorbell rang. At 11:43 p.m. I froze. Who the hell would be at my door at that hour? Peering through the peephole, I saw a dark-suited man standing in the hallway. No name badge, no delivery box, just a briefcase. He knocked again. Slow and steady. "Mr. Drake, we need to talk." I didn't move. "Corporate affairs. We have some questions about the data breach you initiated." My blood ran cold. Data breach? They were flipping the narrative again. I stepped back, quiet as a ghost, my heart hammering. After a few minutes, the man turned and walked away, his footsteps fading down the hall. When I finally exhaled, my hands were shaking. They weren't just trying to cover their tracks anymore. They were coming after me. But if they thought I'd back down, they were wrong. Because that same night, I made a copy of everything. Every document, every email, every file, and sent it to an outside journalist I trusted. Someone who didn't owe Ridgewell a damn thing.
The morning the first article hit, the city felt smaller. I was sitting at my kitchen table, nursing stale coffee, when my phone erupted with notifications. The headline flashed across my screen: Ridgewell Analytics in Crisis. Internal audit reveals possible data manipulation on high-profile account. My chest tightened. For a second, I felt exposed, like a man standing in the middle of a street with everyone staring. Then I breathed, and the reaction that followed surprised me. A quiet, fierce calm. This was exactly what I'd wanted. Not for fame or vindication, but to stop a lie from hurting more people. The article was careful, sourced, and damning. It described the internal probe, the suspension of a senior executive, no names, and emphasized the board's commitment to a full investigation. It quoted an anonymous compliance official saying, "We will not tolerate manipulation of client data at any level." It mentioned the Wexler account and hinted at potential legal exposure. Most importantly, the journalist referenced documents that matched the files I'd sent, metadata included. The piece spread fast. Local outlets ran follow-ups. Financial blogs picked it up and parsed the allegations. Within hours, LinkedIn had turned into a rumor mill. Former employees posting thinly veiled comments, junior analysts whispering about ethics, and investors asking hard questions. Ridgewell's PR team sent a tightly worded statement: "We are cooperating fully with the investigation and will not comment further." But the quiet language was meaningless next to the unfolding disclosures. The market reacted nervously. Wexler sent a stern request for an immediate audit. The board convened emergency sessions. Everyone with power suddenly had very little sleep. And Robert? He looked like a man in a storm. A colleague texted me a photo of him leaving the building with his shoulders hunched, face pale. The arrogance that used to armor him had cracked. Then, the inevitable backlash came, and it came fast. That afternoon, I received an email from Ridgewell's legal team demanding I stop unauthorized disclosures and threatening legal action for unauthorized access and distribution of company material. The tone was formal, cold, and meant to intimidate. They called for a meeting to clarify facts. It was exactly what I'd anticipated. Their playbook was to blur the lines, to intimidate the whistleblower into silence, to make the narrative about process violations rather than the fraud exposed. Classic containment. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer and to the journalist. 2 minutes later, my lawyer called. "Ignore them publicly.
Save every communication. They're building a paper trail. That email just did that for us. The journalist replied, "We'll publish the next piece tomorrow. Stay off social media for now. We'll protect you." That night, with the city lights outside my window, I felt the weight of being a target. A car slowed outside my building and idled for a moment before moving on. Someone left an anonymous envelope in my mailbox. Inside, a single typed line, "You should have stayed quiet." No return address, no signature. Fear prickled like cold needles, but I put the envelope in a drawer, made another copy of my archive, and kept working. The journalists did their job brilliantly. The follow-up article expanded the story. It named the executive who had been suspended, Robert Collins, and quoted Wexler's legal counsel hinting at potential contract rescission. It included documentation of the altered spreadsheets and a timeline that made the fraud indisputable. The piece concluded with a line that would haunt Ridgewell's boardroom for weeks. "When corporate incentives outpace ethics, people get hurt, and the truth eventually finds a way out." The reaction was seismic. Board members who'd once nodded at Robert's proposals began distancing themselves. A hedge fund investor sent an ultimatum: clean house or we withdraw support. Conversations that had been hushed in corners turned into boardroom arguments. A few executives who'd been Robert's allies started to call for immediate transitions to limit liability. The higher you looked in the org chart, the clearer the panic. Then came the retaliation I'd feared but expected. Ridgewell countersued the journalist's outlet, claiming reckless reporting, and publicly announced it had retained an outside forensic firm to verify the integrity of internal systems. The firm's initial statement, carefully phrased, suggested there had been a possible breach originating from an external actor. That narrative was a perfect diversion if you wanted to muddy the waters. Instead of addressing internal manipulation, you shift the story to hacking and leaks. And who looks like the suspect then? The man who had already been fired. The former employee who'd gone public. It was a familiar tactic. Change the frame, create confusion, and hope the public forgets the original allegation. But this time, it wasn't going to work. The journalist had sources, independent forensic details, and Rachel had the compliance audit trail that matched my metadata. We had a redundancy of proof that made it brutal for Ridgewell to simply gaslight the public. Internally, things grew messy.
Sources, and pin the blame on a rogue employee with access. The mediator, a lawyer with a smooth voice, called it a restorative conversation. I declined the meeting through my counsel. There was no negotiation to be had. You don't negotiate with fraud. Instead, the board did something unexpected. They convened a public session to address investor concerns and announced a temporary leadership restructuring. They appointed an interim chief risk officer from an outside firm to oversee compliance and audit the Wexler account. The move signaled serious trouble for Robert. And yet, I felt the noose tightening in another way. Anonymous threats increased. My landlord called to tell me someone had inquired about my apartment. My LinkedIn inbox filled with veiled insults and threats to expose me for whatever skeleton they'd invent. It was a pressure campaign. This was when leverage became crucial. Facts were my shield and my sword. I started informing Wexler directly. I sent an email, politely worded, detailing the discrepancies and offering to provide evidence. Wexler's legal team replied within hours, asking for everything. Within a day, they had their own consultants digging into Ridgewell's submissions. When a major client starts asking questions, boards act fast. Wexler's involvement turned this into more than internal drama. It became a potential legal and financial catastrophe for Ridgewell. With external counsel now in play, the company's ability to sweep this under a rug evaporated. And as the dust settled into a clearer shape, one reality emerged. The company needed a credible face to restore trust. Their investors wanted change, not a scapegoat. They wanted a leader who could navigate compliance, reassure clients, and rebuild credibility. A leader who understood the data, the risks, and who wasn't tainted by the scandal. Word spread quietly through industry contacts that the board was looking for an internal candidate, someone who knew Ridgewell's systems, who could captain the ship through legal storms, and who could be trusted by clients. Someone who understood the numbers. Rumors are dangerous, but they can be useful. I heard through a friend of a friend that there was talk of an interim role, a restructuring that might include replacing key executives. The same people who had once looked down at me as a junior analyst were now whispering my name with a different tone. I didn't seek power, but I'd always cared about integrity. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who built his career on image had hollowed out the foundation by shortcutting ethics. In the wreckage, what mattered was not revenge. It was rebuilding something honest. So I sat back, cataloged every new document, and prepared to act. I'd handed my archive to the journalist and to Wexler. I'd kept a copy with my lawyer. If Ridgewell wanted to make this ugly, I had backup. If they wanted to rebuild, I could be part of that rebuild. Not for ego, but to ensure the kind of accountability I'd wanted from day one. But the board needed to be convinced. And convincing the people who had been complicit, or silent, would take more than headlines. It would take testimony, a clear narrative, and the public will to demand change. The next morning, a note arrived at my lawyer's office from a woman named Ms. Harlow at Corporate Compliance. It was brief. "We would like to speak with you, off the record. We want to understand your findings directly." It was an opening. The first time someone inside the machine had reached out, not in defense, but to listen. I answered their call. I set conditions: full immunity for cooperation, witness protection if necessary, and a seat at the table to advise on reforms. It was audacious, but the leverage I held made audacity reasonable. They agreed, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the momentum shift decisively in my favor.
The meeting with Ridgewell's compliance board wasn't held in their glass tower downtown. Not this time. It was in a rented conference room at a neutral site. No company logos, no press, no PR handlers. Just a long table, a few silent executives, 2 lawyers, and the woman who'd signed the letter, Ms. Harlow. When I walked in, her expression was calm, unreadable. "Mr. Drake," she said, motioning to a seat. "Thank you for coming." I nodded. "You said this was off the record." "It is, but it will shape how the record is written later." That was fair. For the next 2 hours, I laid everything out. Every timestamp, every discrepancy, every document. I showed how the altered data matched Robert's personal logins, how the financial model had been skewed, how the metadata trail confirmed the manipulation came from executive access levels, not analysts like me. They listened. No interruptions, no denials, just quiet note-taking and the occasional tightening of a jaw. Finally, when I finished, Miss Harlow leaned back and said softly, "This aligns with what our internal auditors found. Mr. Collins authorized multiple revisions to Wexler's reports without secondary review. The board will be notified." She paused, studying me. "You understand what you've done here, right?" I frowned slightly. "Exposed fraud." She shook her head. "You've changed the company's legal liability profile. You didn't just expose one man, you forced an entire system to confront its rot." Her tone wasn't accusatory. If anything, it was impressed. 2 weeks later, the official announcement came. Robert Collins, terminated for cause. The press release was brief, clinical, and devastating. Mr. Collins has been found to have violated company policy and ethical compliance standards. Ridgewell Analytics remains committed to transparency and integrity. He disappeared from LinkedIn the next day. But the ripples went much further than him. 3 board members resigned quietly. A senior vice president retired early. The company froze bonuses for all executives pending a policy review. And then the thing I least expected happened. Ridgewell called me. Formally, this time. They wanted me back. Not as an analyst, as head of data compliance. When the offer came through, I stared at the email for nearly 10 minutes, reading the words over and over. Part of me wanted to delete it, to never set foot in that building again, to move on, find peace somewhere that didn't smell of corporate deceit. But another part, the part that had stayed up nights cleaning other people's messes, the part that still believed work could have meaning, told me this was exactly where I was supposed to be. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted reform. I accepted. My first day back at Ridgewell felt surreal. The same lobby, the same security guard, but the atmosphere was different. People glanced at me with cautious respect. Some nodded quietly, others looked away, embarrassed or ashamed. My new office wasn't on the 23rd floor where Robert used to sit. It was one level below, smaller, simpler, but mine. As I unpacked my files, Rachel walked in carrying 2 coffees. "Guess we're colleagues again," she said with a small smile. "Feels strange, like walking back into a place that used to be haunted." She set the coffee on my desk. "Haunted, maybe, but now you get to be the one who does the exercising." Over the next few months, I rebuilt the compliance department from the ground up. We rewrote the review policies, implemented dual verification systems, and created transparent escalation channels so no junior analyst would ever be forced to falsify data again. For the first time, Ridgewell Analytics became a place where truth mattered more than optics. I still saw Robert's shadow sometimes, in old emails, in project archives, in the way some older executives spoke his name like a curse. But his ghost had no power anymore. The man who once silenced others with intimidation now existed only as a cautionary tale. 6 months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just a single envelope. Inside, a short handwritten note. "You won, but so did the truth. Take care of what you built. R." I stared at it for a long time. There was no apology, no justification, just acknowledgement. And strangely, that was enough. A year after my firing, Ridgewell released its annual ethics report. My department's reforms were highlighted as a model for corporate accountability. The firm regained client trust, including Wexler's. And one morning, as I looked out over the skyline from my office window, not with pride, but quiet satisfaction, I realized something had changed inside me too. The anger was gone, the fear had faded, all that remained was peace, because the truth had outlived the lies. And I had too.